In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate everything that you need to know about a constructor in Java. Now, we have been working in previous lessons and we've been using constructors in Java, but this lesson I'm going to confine myself in explaining what a constructor is and what does it really do for us. So a constructor in Java is nothing but a special type of method that is used to initialize the object. So for instance, the Java constructor is invoked at the time of object creation, and it also constructs the values. For example, it will provide data for the object. That is why it is known as the constructor. So in simpler terms, the constructor simply provides data for the object. The two basic rules that you need to know about the constructor is that first, the constructor name must be the same as its class name. Pretty straightforward. And second, the constructor must also have no explicit return type. Unlike methods, they have return types, but constructor does not have any explicit return types. And there are two types of Java constructors that we'll take a look at. First is the default constructor, also known as the no argument constructor. So if you do not specify a constructor, Java is going to provide a default constructor. And the other constructor is the constructor which contains parameters. So let's jump right in. Let me in fact demonstrate using a piece of code to further clarify the concept of what a Java constructor is. So let's go ahead and open our Eclipse editor. So once I'm in the Eclipse editor, I'm going to go ahead and simply create a new class to demonstrate what a default Java constructor looks like. So I'm going to right click, choose new, and then click on class. I'm going to call this class, let's say bike1. Click finish, and this creates a public class called bike1. Now once again, a constructor that have no parameter is known as the default constructor. In other words, it will just contain a set of parentheses. So for instance, let me get rid of this public here. I'm just going to create a class called bike1 to make things simple. And then I'm going to go ahead and specify my constructor called bike1 with a set of parentheses, and then use my curly braces to print something. So system.out.println. I'm going to go ahead and print the following text. So I'm going to say bike is created, put a semicolon, and then our curly braces. Next, I'm going to define my public static void main, and then of course our string argument, set of brackets, curly braces, and next I'm going to say bike1 b equals new, bike1 with a set of parentheses and a semicolon. And let's go ahead and quickly fix the syntax so Java recognizes that we're going to use the println. And next, if I were to run this program, so let's go ahead and click on run. Brings up the save and launch dialog box. Simply click OK. And the following output is provided, which says bike is created. So in this example, I did not create the no argument constructor in the bike class. It'll be invoked basically at the time of the object creation. And that's why Java also creates a warning message that says the value of the local variable b is not used, because we just specified the variable b here. But the real purpose is for you to take a look at what really a constructor is. In other words, a default constructor. But what really is the purpose of a default constructor? The default constructor, think of it as it provides the default values to the object. And this could be 0, null, etc., depending on the type. So for instance, let me go ahead and demonstrate the purpose of the default constructor. So let's start over. Start with a class. Let's call it student 3. Open up our curly braces. Specify int as ID, semicolon, and then string name semicolon. Then I'm going to use the void display and then our curly braces, and of course do a little printout so we can actually see system.out.println, and I'm going to print in the ID plus concatenate this with the name. Use the semicolon and close my curly braces. Next, specify the public, static, void, and then main. Use our string, command line argument, set of brackets, and then of course we open our curly braces, and then use student3 as S1 equals new student3 semicolon. Once again, I'm going to use student3, specify S2 equals new student3, set of parentheses, semicolon, and then of course I can use the s1.display method, s1.display, semicolon, and then s2 also the same. Use display, set of parentheses, and a semicolon. Quickly fix the syntax for the print in, so Java knows that we're using the print in versus the print. So let's test it out, and this would obviously just return the 0 or null values. So let's click on run, click OK to save, and of course we get the error that could not find or load the main class called bike1. And the reason for this is that we violated one of the rules of the constructor, because the name bike1 has to match student3. So either we change this to bike1 where it says student3, or we save it as a new class. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to copy this, create a new class. I'm going to call this student3, click finish, and then simply paste our code that we actually did. So now student3 matches student3. Let me run this again. Here's our student3.java. Click OK to save. Click proceed, and you'll notice the output would be 0 and null. And obviously our class, Java says the type student3 already is defined because we copied and pasted. But the important aspect is that the purpose of a default constructor is simply provides the default values to the object, like 0, null, and etc. So you get the concept and the idea of a Java default constructor. Now the second type of Java constructor is a constructor that contains some parameters, and this is simply used to provide different values to the distinct objects. So for example, next I'm going to create a constructor of, let's say, a student class that have 2 parameters, but you could really have any number of parameters in the constructor. For our purpose, I'm going to create a constructor that contains 2 parameters. So let me go ahead and right click Java Introduction, click New, and then choose Class. I want to call it Student4 and click Finish. So here, let me get rid of the public here. So just creating a class called Student4, and next specify int ID, and then string as name, semicolon, and then go ahead and specify student4, and here I'm going to use 2 parameters. So first, of course, the int I, comma, and then use string for n. Open a curly braces, and then define ID as I, semicolon, and then name equals n, semicolon, and then close our curly braces. Next, I can specify the void keyword. So void display, set of parentheses, and then our curly braces, and then of course our print statement called system.out.println. And And then what am I printing? Simply the ID plus space, and then concatenate this with the name. Use the semicolon, and of course close our curly braces. And then I'm going to use my public static void main, and then of course our string argument, and then we can open the curly braces. And here I'm going to specify the student 4, for instance, and then S1 would equal new student 4. And for this constructor, of course, since I'm using 2 parameters, I'll specify, let's say, 111, comma, and then John, because the first is the integer and the other one is the string or text. Put a semicolon, and then for student 4S2, this would equal new student 4. And here I can use, let's say, a couple of other integer and string, so it'll be, let's say, 222, comma, and then I can use Chris, semicolon, and then of course I can display. So I can say S1 dot display, and then same with S2 dot display. Perfect. Fix our syntax quickly. So Java recognizes this, and Java does this because it wants to make sure that you're not using print versus print in. So no big deal here, and we just simply fix the syntax. So let's go ahead and do this. So now in this example, I have a constructor that contains 2 parameters. One is integer and the other one is string. So let's go ahead and run this. The save and launch dialog box appears. Click OK, and of course I get the result which says 111 John and then 222 Chris as the output. So here I demonstrated the Java constructor that contains parameter values. So you've seen 2 types of constructors, the default constructor in Java, as well as the constructor that contains certain parameters. So practice using these constructors, and let's move to the next lesson.